Have you ever heard this? Kids are like sponges when they learn their first language. I imagine you have. And also when they learn a second language. Oh, it's so much easier for kids when they learn to speak another language if they learn it early. And why does that make sense to us? Because there's truth to it. Why is that? And this is what we were saying before, where second language acquisition and first have an overlap. Being younger can make a difference, right? But it's not as simple as just being younger and being a sponge. But let's look. I think we will agree in their first language. So I need to be careful, distinguish. I'm easing into SLA. But for first language, right? Unless you're in a really bizarre situation, normal situations, socially, you're going to get a lot of language and you're going to hear the same things over and over again. So it's easier to remember them, and repetition, we're going to get into more soon. Relaxed, curious, and engaged. All of these things here. What's interesting is when we look at the methods that work, the approaches that work, we're going to be focusing on these things. And that's why in a second language, really the basics, needing a lot of repetitive input, being interested, being relaxed, not worrying so much about making mistakes, not thinking too much about how the language works. Those are second language issues as well as first language issues. So what would be the biggest difference if we're saying, oh, this is what kids do in their first language? Well, in a second language, do you always get enough exposure to input? You might be thinking, oh yeah, if you're that student in Brazil, that EFL student from the other slide, and you're only getting English in the classroom or, very little outside the classroom, there's that. Ooh, is every student in a language classroom relaxed, curious, and engaged, or on an app or doing anything in the language? And what happens if they get a little older? Is it harder to keep them curious and have them feel relaxed? What about errors? Is that an age-related thing? I think often it is. It goes with the one below, right? So we're more anxious as we, more self-conscious about making mistakes. And we also think more about how the language works. Now, thinking about how language works can be interesting, but here's the